Hello, everybody. This is River Devora, and this is my first podcast of Strong Roots and Wide Branches. Thank you for joining me. As I do all things starting with prayer, we're going to be starting this recording with prayer. So, blessings and hail to all good spirits. I call upon the guardians and protectors. I call upon the guides and the wisdom keepers and the teachers. May this recording be received by you who are listening to it in the way that you would most benefit from receiving it. Blessings to the land upon which you are standing. Blessings to all of the lands that you have walked to get to this moment. Blessings to your local biome. Blessings to all of the living and non-living things that you are in relationship with in this moment in space, place, and time. Blessings to the ancestors of the land that you are standing upon. May those ancestors know peace and healing, and may their descendants know sovereignty and justice. Blessings to your own ancestors, blessings to all of our collective ancestors, to those wise and strong ones who have come before. May your lives bring us the inspiration that we need to be able to continue your good work forward. May we learn from your mistakes, heal the harm that you did in your lifetime, and heal that which was done to you so that we don't bring that pain forward. Blessings to the descendants, those who will come later. May your future prayers lift us up as we lift you up, and may we leave behind a legacy we can all be proud of. Blessings to the continuation of the work, and blessings to the growth. Blessings to all of our allies and friends, all of those blessed ones in and out of bodies, and those who aren't ever in bodies. Blessings to the friendships that allow us to move forward. Blessings to the vast guiding forces that know and shape our destiny, and blessings to the web from which all things come and to which all things return. Blessings to those who have taught me, and blessings to those who continue to teach you. Blessings and hail, and thank you for joining us. So I'm River. Some of you already know me, some of you probably don't. I've been teaching Strong Roots and Wide Branches for a good number of years now. And today what we're really going to be talking about is kind of an introduction to my opinion about polytheism. What is it? What isn't it? Where do we kind of go from here? Where I always like to start in these kinds of conversations is with some basic assumptions and really making the implicit explicit. What I have found is that often in the broader pagan and polytheist communities, we kind of have a tendency to shorthand some of our language. So we'll use words or phrases or concepts and then assume that everybody knows what we're talking about. And often we really just don't. So in the interest of not kind of using buzzwords and assuming that we all know what those buzzwords mean, I'm going to have the bulk of this particular podcast be spelling out in clear, full sentences, I hope, some of my basic assumptions and biases, what I bring to the conversation about polytheism. So, first off, my belief, and with all of these beliefs, you are welcome, of course, obviously, to believe whatever you'd like. I'm not necessarily saying that any of this is right or wrong. I generally prefer to lead with questions rather than with answers. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I believe, and you can take it or leave it. And I'm always happy to engage in conversation about it. So my basic belief is that gods are real. And what I mean by that is they are individual, freestanding, independent beings who are in some qualitative way different than living or dead humans. Dead humans, some of them end up apotheosed. That's a whole other conversation we'll probably have another time, but that gods are different than living or dead humans, and that they exist separately from humans, that each one of us gets to come to the conversation in different ways, and we're all going to have different beliefs about this, and that's fine. I believe that gods would be around even if humans never were. But, your mileage may vary, and that's fine. I tend to come to the table with an assumption of animism. When I say animism, I know that that's a word that can mean a bunch of different things, and different people understand that word in different ways. But basically, I believe that lots of things have some degree of consciousness, whether we have the capacity to connect with those things or not. And of course, regardless of whether we or those other things are interested in connecting. Because other things have consciousness, they may not have consciousness quite in the same way that we do, and most likely don't. Um, so their consciousness may not be shaped in such a way that we can communicate. And of course, there's also always the question of consent. And just because something or someone can communicate doesn't necessarily mean they want to with us. That doesn't make them any less conscious. It just makes them uninterested in us, and that's okay too. But I do come to the table with an assumption of animism, that there is consciousness that is more than just living humans being conscious. For me, the importance of the work, and I use the work with a capital W because doesn't that sound dramatic? Um, Work. Let's actually take a step back and unpack, what does that mean? Why are we even having a conversation about polytheism? I'm going to get into that a little bit more later, but to shorthand it, polytheism for some people it forms the basis of religion. For some people forms the basis of spirituality. For some people forms the basis of that's just the world. We live in a world where there's gods, and whether I choose to engage with them or not is a completely different conversation. But when we're coming to the table with an interest in engaging in some way, shape, or form, that's where that work with a capital W starts to come in, whether it's our personal work that we're trying to affect in the world, or the way that we are operating in the world. That's kind of what I mean by that. But polytheism. So part of my goal, part of my biases here is about creating and maintaining right relationship. Um, I love the phrase right relationship. It is absolutely 1,000% not mine. People have been using that particular terminology for many, many, many years in many, many different contexts. I quite like the framing of it, though. When I'm talking about right relationship and how we show up in the world from the perspective of religion, spirituality, philosophy, magic, etc., how do we walk in the world? Who are we trying to be in right relationship with? The spectrum of right relationship I see as kind of each one of us standing in the center of a wagon wheel, or even in the center of a web. And each one of us has our own web. And of course, all of our spokes or our strands of web are all connecting all over the place in a big tangled tapestry that goes across space as well as across time. When I talk about right relationship, I'm talking about right relationship to one's own self, to our own selves, right relationship to other living humans, right relationship to our ancestors, and I will at a later date unpack ancestors. I know that can be a very activating word for some people for all sorts of very valid reasons, but ancestors, those who've come before. Right relationship to deities, or to those larger beings that shape destiny, right relationship to the land that we are part of, to other living beings, to other non-embodied consciousnesses or entities, and potentially to others. Right relationship is a subjective state based on mutual respect and consent, ideally, subject to the needs and desires of all who are engaged in the building of those relationships. Relationships are dynamic things, and there is no one rightness of relationship, because what looks like right relationship between me and my kids is going to look real different than right relationship between me and my house, or me and my car, or me and my professors, or me and my students, et cetera, et cetera. And so we build it out from there. Each relationship is going to be unique to those who are engaged in the relationship. So there is no one single standard, but I like to think that, mutual respect and consent would be most of the time pretty hardwired in there, the majority of the time, you would hope. Um, I believe in the importance of embodied spirituality. Now, what do I mean by that? I would say that in many spiritual traditions, and I'm not going to make anybody right or wrong, I'm just talking about what my preferences are. Um, Sometimes you see this theme of the best way to do spiritual processes, to do spirit work, to engage in religion, etc., is to kind of do this up and away model. How far away can I separate my thoughts, my spirit, my higher self from my physical body, from the material world, that there's some sense of a hierarchy there, where the upper portions, the big thoughts and the spirit and all this kind of stuff, is somehow pure and clean, and shouldn't have to be bothered with all of this mucky, sticky, earthy, emotionally tangly stuff and things. That's not how I do it. That's not how I do it. My belief is that the goal of religion or spirituality is not necessarily to achieve some sort of enlightened state, which still, while still alive, that may include leaving the body behind. I believe that the body and the physical existence is important and meaningful, although, of course, all of this may be difficult individually due to aspects of personal history. Part of why I'm spelling out all of these different biases is because these are the biases that my work is really deeply steeped in. You don't have to agree with me at all. But if you're engaging with any of my work, then these are going to be some of the foundation basement level stuff that you're going to be finding, that I'll be continuing to cycle through as we go. So my bias definitely is the importance of embodiment, with a recognition that embodiment is difficult. Now, what is embodiment exactly? I'm going to unpack that in a lot more depth in future conversations, I suspect, because that is one of my biggest, most favorite things to tirade about. But shorthand, embodiment. Embodiment is the act of being present in an engaged and physical material world kind of a way. Embodiment. Can I find my toes without having to look at them or feel them with my fingers? Can I be aware of the reality of the physical parts of myself? Do I feel myself in this moment? Do I feel my emotions in this moment as well? We also embody our emotions. The opposite, there's kind of two opposites of embodiment, and I'm kind of jumping ahead because this is my favorite subject, so I'm going to just touch on it lightly. But there's two opposites really to embodiment. One opposite of embodiment is dissociation, which is where we are still alive, but not really feeling our physical bodies, or not really noticing our emotions or our place here in this moment in space and time. The other opposite of embodiment would be disembodiment, which would be kind of basically being dead, where you no longer have a body to be referencing or returning back to at all. Embodied spirituality. So I think embodied spirituality is important. Your mileage may vary, but I think it's important. Part of why I think it's important is because we may very well be a lot of things right now and in the past and in the future. And what we are right now, if you're listening, I'm assuming, if you have hands or bodies of some sort and ears or some way of listening to what I'm talking about right now, then you are most likely a physical living person. I'm assuming if you're listening to my podcast, you're a physical living person. As long as we're physical living people here in this material plane, we're operating out of our bodies as our primary place of reference. Even when we're having big spiritual experiences, even if you're doing journey work or, any of the different ways we may engage spiritually, you're still, gosh, I hate these metaphors, but I'm going to use it anyway because it's useful. You're still kind of running it through the wetware, right? Your nervous system is still what's sending and receiving information. Your brain, your nervous system is still what is processing whatever might be happening, even if it's your thoughts that are carrying you. Your thoughts, as long as you're still alive, are running through your nervous system, through your brains. So if that is true, I have a belief, my bias is that we got born for a reason, that we are doing this for some reason or another. And that part of that reason is that as long as we are mortal, and stuck here, or joyfully here, however your personal experience might be of that experience, we have a certain kind of bias and perspective that is different than the biases and the perspectives of non-mortal, non-human entities. For one thing, I hate to say it like this, we all have an expiration date. We're not going to be here forever. That sets our perspective around time a little different than gods or spirits or other non-corporeal beings. Um, they don't have an expiration date, I guess, most likely. I don't know, but it sounds like they probably don't. So they're not going to be as beholden to the aging process and that looming expiration date. So for us, we kind of have a little bit of a fire under our butts to get certain things accomplished in this lifetime, to have certain experiences. Our experience of being mortal is the bias that we bring to the table when we engage with non-corporeal beings, when we engage with gods and spirits and blessed powers of a variety of sorts. So I don't see this, our current mortality, our embodied state, I don't see this as an obstacle that needs to be overcome, but a strength that provides us with different skill sets than other non-embodied, non-human consciousnesses. We have a perspective that's different than the perspective of gods and spirits, and that's beautiful. Actually, it's a source of strength and wisdom. And it means that our opinions, our perspective is going to be different. And when gods and spirits and blessed powers engage with us, they are engaging with us where they understand most of the time that we are living mortal beings, and they are coming to us to engage, wanting us to be standing in that bias. We don't need to pretend to be something we're not. In fact, they're probably coming to us because they're pretty happy that we are shaped the way that we are. Otherwise, they would just go and hang out with other blessed powers that aren't in bodies. So that's another bias. Another bit of perspective that I want to unwind here, want to kind of dig into a little bit, is the human role in all of this. I believe human communities and the origin of human-based religious systems are important and worthy of being respected. While the gods are separate and have their own perspectives on things, human traditions originated out of specific cultures during specific periods of time. Some of those traditions may be living traditions, some may have been reconstructed, some may be reimagined, while others are created from new in partnership with non-human entities. Where a tradition is part of a living culture, it's important to respect, in other words, not exploit, those whose traditions these are by right of living lineage, blood or spiritual transmission. Basically, it's important to stay in dialogue around issues of cultural misappropriation, keeping an eye around avoiding the exploitation of non-culturally dominant human groups. I always like to bring this into the conversation because it's important, because it's really important, because spirituality is more than just spirituality and religion is more than just me sitting at home alone, engaging with powers. If you're sitting at home alone and your religion and spirituality and all of that kind of stuff never ever impacts or influences the way that you walk in the world where people can see you, then you can do whatever you want. Who's going to stop you, right? But the moment that you are engaging with the world, it's important to remember that all of these things are contextualized. Relationships are contextualized, and we are contextualized, communal, embedded beings. And we impact the community around us, including human community, and human community impacts us back. Again, while the gods themselves are separate, they have their own perspectives on things. The fact that we even have a god name, unless you were dealing with new gods whose names have never been revealed, which I know some folks do, that is also a thing. But for most of us, I would say, at least many of us who are engaging in the kind of polytheisms that involve either engaging with living traditions that are still around or referencing older traditions and re-engaging with gods who had groups of people that worshiped them, where perhaps that worship halted for a variety of historical reasons, and then we're in the process of re-engaging with that. If a god has a name that somebody else gave them, then there is a set of relationships that other folks came up with. And that set of relationships, those protocols for engagement, are protocols that were developed over time and in specific community, cultural, and location contexts. Those contexts are real important. They're really important. So when we're engaging with gods and we are leaning into protocols, whose protocols are we engaging in? The gods contribute some amount of, insistence or request for the development of those protocols, but so did the humans who developed those the first time around. I think protocols can be very important. And when we are re-engaging where perhaps protocols were broken and need or lost altogether and need to be recreated, we're recreating out of something bigger than just our one-on-one kind of a circumstance, especially if we are then engaging in group practices of any sort, which again, we're going to talk about more later. There are lots of blessed powers out in the world. There have been and there will continue to be vast galaxies of relationships and beings to engage with and ways to engage meaningfully. If we're going to be leaning in on powers that come from living traditions, I think it's real important to continue to find ways to respect those people who created those protocols to begin with. And if it is appropriate and if there is welcome and it seems important, then even figuring out perhaps how to be one of those people in a committed way. And that sometimes means engaging with traditions when there are traditions to be engaged with. Humans are the gatekeepers of those traditions, and that's actually appropriate. So, staying in dialogue around issues of cultural respect and avoiding exploitation and recognizing where we ourselves stand with regard to all of those conversations. This is where we get into axes of privilege, axes of historical disenfranchisement and historical oppression. All of that stuff is part of the conversation as well if we're going to be doing all of this respectfully. Again, we talked earlier about right relationship. This is another piece around right relationship. And then also, the work that I do, my goal is to foster interfaith polytheist dialogue and conversation. I am totally delighted if any of the things that I say land for any of you. Does not have to all land. I don't really have any bigger goals here. I'm not out to convert anybody or argue about whose gods are better or more real, or even necessarily whose practices are better or more real. I'm just here to bring some conversation to the table. Okay, so those are some of my biases. I'll continue to unpack biases and perspective as we go along. Let's talk about polytheism. What is polytheism? We talked about it a little bit already, but what is polytheism? Polytheism is I've heard a lot of different discussions about what that word means. Um, we can't really define polytheism in some ways without defining who is a polytheist, because polytheism in theory is just a belief in gods, a belief that there is more than one god, that gods exist, that they're real. But there's lots of ways to impact that. If you are a religious polytheist, then it would be more than just belief that the gods exist. It would also be a desire to engage respectfully in some way, shape, or form with those beings in an ongoing way. Religion implies ongoing relationship. A polytheist would be somebody who believed in gods and treated them with some amount of respect or regard. Now, what that might look like, there's kind of endless variations in that. So, what do polytheists believe? Well, if you're a polytheist listening to this podcast, what do you believe? Because what you believe might be a little different than what somebody else believes. Before I got into higher level religion, I've always been at least lowercase p polytheist. I've always believed in multiple gods, but there was definitely periods of my life when I was a lot younger where I believed in all of them and just didn't really want to have anything to do with any of them. thought that they were a little bit dramatic, all these gods and all of their big scary stuff and things are nonsense. And but I always believed in them. I believe in a lot of gods. I am certainly not the one who's going to say one set of gods are real and another set of gods are not real. But just because I believe that gods are real doesn't necessarily mean that it's my responsibility or my job or that it's even possible for me to engage religiously in a meaningful way with all of them. So there are the gods that I stand most closely with. There are gods that I have oaths with. There are traditions that I stand in. And then there's lots of gods that I do not have oaths with, that I don't have ongoing relationship with, that there's religions that I am not a part of course. There's, hundreds of religions, thousands of religions, and I'm certainly not a member of the majority of them. But that doesn't mean that I think that, for example, my friends who are Irish polytheists are wrong. Their gods are 100,000% valid. I've been to their rituals. I've been quite impressed and very, very humbled and very grateful, both for the living human communities that have allowed me into their rituals and to the gods themselves who have brought me many blessings, even when I am not one of theirs. So it is possible for there to be multiple religions and multiple protocols and many, many gods, but we don't necessarily have to engage religiously with all of them. So just because you're a polytheist doesn't mean that you have to engage religiously with all of the gods. I believe that all gods are real. You don't have to. So um, yeah, polytheism. Polytheism is complex and it's going to be individual. There's a lot of polytheisms. There are many religions and spiritual paths and magical paths. And I know I keep using those words and I'm going to dig into that in a little bit. Um, there's a lot of different ways to engage with the blessed powers and with the world around us. And polytheism is a way, is one of the many ways, and it means as much or as little as we decide that we're going to let it mean for us. So what do polytheists practice? I don't know. What do you practice? Polytheists practice can look a lot of different ways. What do polytheists believe? Well, what do you believe? We can believe a lot of different things. Let's see. What do I actually, you know what? I am going to go ahead and dig into this religion versus spirituality versus magic stuff, because I think that's an important piece that I want to I want to draw out a little bit more. These are all words that I have used as buzzwords for many, 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 many years that I've been involved in a variety of magical, spiritual, and occult communities. And that's another subset of words that people use all the time and often mean vastly different things by the words themselves. So I am going to give my definition of these words with an acknowledgement that all of these words are potentially a little controversial and different people are going to mean different things. Um, and the meanings on some of these words can differ so greatly that I would strongly encourage anybody who is engaging in a conversation with a newer person or a newer conversation with somebody I already know, if you're talking about these things, to not assume that everybody's definitions are the same. So when somebody says, "Oh, I don't believe in religion, but I sure believe in spirituality," great. When you say religion, what do you mean? When you say spirituality, what do you mean? These are actually really important questions because we're all going to define these a little differently. I'm going to give you my definitions, but again, my definitions may differ from yours. But these are the definitions that I tend to move forward with when I'm engaging in the work personally, but also when I'm teaching it. So I do like to bring it out. Oh boy. That oh boy is because there are things moving around in my office, and I'm going to check in real quick and see if I need to say something I haven't already said. Why are my spirits moving my things around? Well, I guess they'll throw something at me if I say something I'm not supposed to. Okay, let's start with the word spirituality. I hear people use this word all the time. People love to use the word spirituality, and often folks I've heard many people preferring the word spirituality over the word religion. And often that has to do with what I'm going to call religious trauma, or at least negative experiences with things that call themselves religion. And much of the time when people use the word religion, not everybody and not always, but I would say enough times that I'm going to call it out explicitly here. It is not uncommon for me to come across people saying the word religion and really honestly meaning Christianity, whatever Christianity it is that they grew up with or that they have a problem with. Or that they assume is the default. Christianity is not the default religion. It is not the default shaping of what religion is or can be. But many people assume that all religion is Christianity, possibly with, different pizzazz shaped around it or whatnot. But I'm going to get into what I think these words mean. So for people who tend to have some amount of religious complexity in their history, often specifically, although not always, often specifically, complexity around contact with Christianity or their own personal family or personal background with Christianity, will sometimes say, I don't believe in religion, but I love spirituality. I'll engage with spirituality, but not religion. Um, my definition of spirituality is a personal thing. It's the individual, personal, felt sense of connection with something greater than you, with something that feels bigger, maybe with something that you feel like you are networked into or part of. But spirituality is a felt sense. It's a personal journey, and often very private, but also very, very subjective. Spirituality, we know it when we feel it. Spirituality is a thing that we feel. Religion, on the other hand, the way I define it, and again, different people define religion in many different ways, but my definition of religion is that it's the organized structures and traditions, generally, but not always, with some community involvement, for the purpose of connecting with and serving your gods and powers, or engaging in some traditionally shaped sense of right relationship with the world around you. There are obviously a lot of religions, and there's a lot of different ways to do that kind of thing. But when we're engaging in religion, we're kind of getting more into the protocols that support right relationship. What are the protocols? What are the preset rules and assumptions? What are the structures? It's a little more formal. You can have religion without spirituality, and you can have spirituality without religion. You can also have both together, and ideally, the two support one another. The spirituality being that felt sense of being connected to something bigger, and the religion being the structured protocols and guidelines that you would engage with in order to be able to respectfully interact with gods and powers or engage in ethical and helping ways with the community around you, both living as well as non-living community. So where does faith fit into either one of those things? Faith is another one of those funny words that my personal cultural and ethnic and religious background puts me a little bit different than many of the folks that I tend to engage with around me, because I wasn't raised Christian, and the religion that I was raised in didn't have as central of a focus on the importance of belief. We had a very central, we put a lot of importance on the concept of behavior, of practice, but not so much of belief. Belief in the religion I was raised in, which is Judaism. I was raised Ashkenazi, Jewish, in a fairly traditional immigrant community. And in my religious background, what we did was more important than what we thought, because belief is a thing that can shift over time. Faith is a thing that is a personal journey, and there isn't necessarily one correct answer or one right way of doing things, but what we can all agree on is a code of behavior and expected practices. And so that was in the tradition I grew up in, what guided us. But I know that that's not how it works for other folks, especially folks who may have been raised Christian or even culturally Christian, where faith and belief does take a more central role in many of those family of religions, the Christian family of religions, where it is your belief that makes or breaks your relationship with God. So it is not my place to tell any individual person what their beliefs should be, what faith should be. Um, where does faith and belief fit into spirituality and religion? It does. It does come in. Um, you, if you're going to be engaging with a spirituality, again, which is your felt sense, your individual, personal felt sense of connection, what exactly are you connecting to? Um, you may or may not put theories on those experiences. For some people, contextualizing those experiences is a really important life work. You know, I was out in the woods and all of a sudden I felt myself connected to every living thing in this local biome, and I was breathing with the trees and I could feel the passage of the birds through the skies as though they were flying through my hair, and I could feel the rustling of the small animals in the leaves as though it were my body, and I could feel the roots in the ground. I want to understand why I was feeling that. What does that mean? Does that mean that I just happened to be in an imaginative, fanciful mindset? Does that mean that I had a brush with something divine? If so, what was that divinity? Was that divinity the forest itself? Um, was it me? Am I really that important? Was it a god? If so, which one? What tradition do they come from, or do they come out of? And if they are connected to some bigger tradition, is there some process of reciprocity that I should be engaging in? Should I leave some sort of an offering? What would be the appropriate offering to leave? Now we're getting into religion, right? Um, so when we start engaging with those questions where faith and belief come in, do I believe that the experience I just had was real? Do I believe that there are blessed powers out there? Do I believe they mean me well? Do I believe that it's possible to engage with them and to have them engage back? Do I believe that it is possible to be in right relationship in some conscious way? Are they aware of me? Do I have a felt sense of being aware of them? Do I believe that they mean me well and that this is good and rightful for everyone? So belief and faith can play a role in this, in terms of motivating to continue to want to engage. Um, but again, for some people, the belief piece is going to be really important. The faith piece is going to be really important. And for some folks, they might kind of have the attitude of, well, I'm not really sure if the gods are real or not, but I am going to behave as though they are, and be willing to make a default assumption that the world that I'm engaging in is bigger than just what I can see with my eyes and touch with my hands. And I'm willing to engage in processes of reciprocity and protocols of right relationship because I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt that there might be something or someone out there that's more than just who I can talk to with my mouth and hear with my ears. So for some folks, the practices are just fine, and the belief actually doesn't have to guide the process. But there has to at least be a little bit of a belief that it's maybe possible, that maybe something bigger than us is out there. Otherwise, we wouldn't bother at all. So, um, but is belief enough? I mean, if you believe that there's somebody out there, and you believe that they want to be in relationship with you, and you believe that you want to be in relationship with them, then what does the act of establishing and maintaining relationship actually look like? That's where we get into religion, and that's where we get into polytheism, is that desire to engage with folks who we believe might be out there and who might mean us well, or who we might feel grateful to for having created a world or built or maintained a world around us or engaged in the world in some way, shape, or form. But the way that we might understand who they are, what their jobs are, what our job is in relation to them, that's going to be very, very individual and definitely not my place to tell you what you should do or not do. There's a couple of other words I want to bring out into this conversation because I think it's bigger than just spirituality and religion. The other piece I want to bring out, another bit of definition I want to chew on a little bit, is the word magic. I know that for a lot of folks who end up in the broader pagan, polytheist, occult, and witchcraft communities, the word magic can mean a lot of different things. A lot of different things. And absolutely, when one person uses that word, unless they unpack it or I really already know them and their background, I have no idea what they mean when they say that word. Just like I have no idea what they mean when they say spirituality or religion. My definition of magic, or how I understand magic. With magic, the magic practitioner is the one who's in charge. With religion and spirituality, it's a relationship for sure. For most religions, there may be kind of an inherent hierarchy of sorts where the gods are bigger. Maybe they are in charge. Maybe they are in charge of fate and destiny. Maybe they are responsible for the world working or not, and the world that we're engaging in running properly. Um, but regardless if it's a god as opposed to one of the other smaller classes of magical beings of non-corporeal beings that may be out there, gods are probably bigger and stronger than us is my assumption. With magic, the magic practitioner is the one who's in charge. So the magician may be making arrangements or making deals or arrangements with other forces, but ultimately, whatever you're trying to do in the world, it's your idea. You're the one that shapes the work. I define magic as the act of changing probability, the act of doing intentional actions to try and change probability. Now, what I mean by that, to unpack that a bunch, I tend to believe that in that whole conversation about fate versus free will, that the answer lies somewhere fuzzy in the middle. Um, I definitely do not personally believe in a fully fated world because how boring would that be if all of the scripts were already written and we are unwitting actors who just kind of trudge through what's already supposed to be happening or what's already been prearranged. That sounds pretty boring, and kind of depressing. And definitely not the kind of world I want to live in, given the amount of horror and tragedy that exists in the world. I don't really want to, I don't like that idea personally at all. But I also think that free will is sounds great, but I know that probability already exists in this world. If I pick up a ball and I throw it, there's all sorts of physics equations that we can run. I am not a physicist. I apologize to physicists and mathematicians who know the formulas that I am referencing badly, but assuming a certain amount of lack of other factors. If you throw a ball and the ball is a certain weight and you throw it at a certain velocity, there's predictions that you could, there's calculations you can make, there's predictions you can make with a fairly high amount of accuracy about how far the ball is going to go and how fast it's going to go and all that kind of thing. Probability says that most likely if you throw a ball at X time, it's going to arrive at the wall it is aimed at Y time, and that it can be thrown and aimed in a specific way. Um, I like to use the metaphor of pebbles dropped in a still pond. So again, if we drop a pebble in a pond, then, and the pebble is a decision or an action that's happening right now. In the absence of complexity, in the absence of other interference, we should be able to predict about how fast the ripples are going to fall out and how high or low a wave is going to be at any given moment. assuming lack of other sorts of things. So when we're looking at, can I predict the future? Well, I mean, I know all sorts of diviners that are super good at that. But there's still this free will piece. There's still this chaos piece, this unpredictability piece, which is that we are not most of the time a single pebble in a still pond of water. That we are a hail of varyingly sized pebbles, rocks, and boulders being thrown at an already rocking body of water that exists in, 5 dimensions or whatnot. And so at any given time, if you throw a rock in the water and then you throw another rock in another place, at some point the two separate ripples are going to meet up. And the combined force of those two ripples, wave motions, at some point they're going to meet up, and the wave may be higher or lower, or happen faster or slower than you might have expected if it was just a single pebble. And so with magic, now we're getting back to magic now that I'm done torturing bad physics metaphors. Thank you for your patience. With magic, what we're trying to do is kind of throw a few extra pebbles into the pond in the hopes that we're going to alter what would otherwise be the likely outcomes. So we're trying to make sure that something happens, or we're trying to make sure that something doesn't happen. So we're trying to alter probability. So with magic, where does the power come from in order to be able to throw those rocks, or to be a rock thrown somewhere? A magic worker might find that power inside themselves. They might find that power sort of ambient in the world around them, or they might make arrangements with gods or spirits or other beings to get power, or to borrow rocks to throw in whatever direction we're trying to throw them in. So with religion, most of the time we're going to be approaching. So what's the difference between magic versus religion? With religion, the gods are in charge. With magic, you're in charge. And both of those are very gross oversimplifications. But you can do real similar stuff. Many folks do very similar things. You can use religion to do magic, and you can use magic to do religion. Both of them can exist in the same continuum. But at the heart of it, when I'm practicing magic, I'm going to bull through. I'm open to suggestions because that's the kind of practitioner I am. But I've decided I want the world to work a certain way, and I'm going to do my darndest to try and push through to make sure that my agenda is what happens. When I'm engaging religiously, I'm going to say prayers, and then I'm also going to take a step back and trust my gods and trust my powers that this is what I want in the world, and I'm praying that what I want is in alignment with what is best for myself and for everyone. But I'm also going to put my faith and my trust that if what I want is not correct, may the correct thing happen. I'm not always going to go to religion when I really need something, because sometimes that's not good enough for me. I'm going to bull through. But I try to be clear about where my focus is, what I'm engaging in, so that I know how to come respectfully. Because if I'm going from a perspective of magic, I may hit up specific blessed powers that I know are open to negotiation. And I'll ask them, hey, there's this thing I want. And I did check in with my gods because I am a good little religious person or whatever. And they said it's okay for me to do the thing. It's not going to go counter to anything, but I really want this thing. So I'm taking point on making sure the thing happens. Will you partner with me? Yes, I am happy to pour you out some booze. Yes, I'm happy to give you a rooster. Yes, I am happy to sing your praises in the morning sunlight, or whatever it is that you want to have that fair reciprocal exchange. But this is what I want. Are you willing to be on my team to make that happen? That's magic. That's where magic comes in. There's a fourth piece that I want to bring in, which is what I'm going to call spirit work or direct contact. Spirit work, direct contact, again, this is our little fourth chunk in this whole conversation, can be part of spirituality, religion, or magic, and also can be its own standalone thing, which is basically There's invisible forces out there. There's vast forces out there. There's non-human conscious beings out there. And I'm going to talk to them and they're going to talk back. Now, just because it's a conversation doesn't make it sacred. Just because it's a conversation doesn't mean they mean us well. Just because it's a conversation doesn't mean that it's religion or spirituality or magic. It might just be a conversation. We can also just have buddies. We could also just have, snarky rap battles with assholes in the woods or whatever the heck it is that we're doing. Um, just because they're invisible doesn't mean that they're smart. Just because they're vast doesn't mean that they mean us well. All of that kind of stuff. Just because the voices are talking doesn't mean we have to listen. But, which is why I put this in its own fourth category, direct contact. Direct contact is not required. I want to say that again. Direct contact is not required for spirituality, religion, or magic. It is not. Some folks do that kind of thing, some don't. It does not make you a better practitioner or a wiser and more holy person if you can do that sort of thing. It doesn't make you missing out on something important if you can't. Some of the most powerful priests I've ever met have been entirely unable to hear gods or spirits independently and have not needed it. And certainly many of us can point to examples that we have seen or experienced in our own communities of folks who were hearing unseen forces just fine and weren't necessarily doing anything useful with that capacity or that ability. Again, so now we have spirituality, religion, magic, and direct contact or spirit work. We have lots of examples of all four of these things. All four of these things can interact in all different kinds of ways, and individual folks may choose any one or more of that category and engage in that place in a way that's meaningful. You don't need one to have the other. I like all four personally, but your mileage may vary, and that's okay. Not everybody who does religion needs magic. Not everybody who does magic needs religion. Not everybody who does spirituality needs any of the rest of it. I think when we start getting into direct contact spirit work, it helps to have the protocols of religion, to have a framework and to have some protections. Because one of the things about religion is that for some, not all, for some religions, there may be initiatory processes, oaths, or other structures that you engage with in order to become officially part of that bigger group and therefore subject to those protocols. Because the thing is that if I am completely unconnected to anything and I march up to some, big invisible jerk in the woods, they don't have to talk to me and they don't have to do anything nice for me or help me out in any way, shape, or form. If I come and I say, hey, buddy, hey, Bungo, we're going to name this invisible make-believe spirit Bungo. Hey, Bungo, I'm part of the Bungo tribe and I did my initiation a year and a half ago. And, I'm the spiritual godchild of so-and-so who's been your priest for a long time. And I am coming to you to initiate a relationship and get to know you. I've brought you some flowers because, I've been told by my teachers and my elders that Bungo loves pink dianthus or whatever, some beautiful little flower. I'm now being really obscure. So I have brought you the dianthus in the ancient traditions of our people, and I'm just saying hi because it's the second full moon of the spring, and that's when we bring you dianthus flowers. And so, how you doing, buddy? If you would like to bless my crops, that would be awesome. If not, that's cool, but here we go. Now all of a sudden we have a structure, right? We have a reason to engage. And Bungo might be like, you're cute. Hey, like if you had been some random person, whatever, but you brought me the flowers that I love in the time of the year when I am happiest to receive those flowers. I would be happy to bless your crops. What kind of nonsense am I talking about now? I'm just making shit up now. Okay. So, anyway, spirituality, religion, magic, direct contact, spirit work. when we have a broader set of protocols that the gods or the spirits or the blessed powers are already familiar with, then when we come into it as a member of those who would engage in those protocols, there's a kind of recognition where they sort of already extend us a little bit of a benefit of the doubt. They are already sort of more willing to engage. Oh, I know how to engage with the larger group that you are affiliated with. So it's nice to meet you. Thank you for engaging in this way. So religion, that's all sort of that realm of religion. Religion can give us a little bit more safety, protection, likelihood of happy engagement, etc., with some of that direct contact sometimes. Magic can do that too in certain ways. You're making arrangements, you're coming in with reciprocity. Um, there are magical traditions that have those kinds of protocols. Um, and of course, spirituality being that felt sense of being able to actually feel it can be a really nice motivator, as well as a bit of a guidepost. Like, did my magic actually work? Am I enjoying the process? Is it worth it to me to be part of religion? Well, spirituality, it feels nice and it feels sacred, and I feel like I'm part of something bigger. I have a felt sense that what I'm doing is working. So you can see how all of those different things kind of interact with each other. So I've been talking for quite some time, so I am going to end the conversation at this point. I think we've covered quite a bit of territory. Thank you for engaging with me in the beginnings of this conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and say some closing prayers, and thank you for listening. So blessings and thanks to all good spirits. Thank you to all who showed up to participate in this conversation. Thank you to those who guided my words and who brought me into this moment. Thank you to the blessed powers that brought you into the conversation to listen and engage. I hope that this conversation has been sparking useful things for you, the listener. Blessings and thanks to the container that contains this work. Blessings and thanks to the way openers that open the way for this work to be received. Blessings and thanks to the land, to this moment in space, place, and time, to the world in which we are a part. Blessings and thanks to the ancestors and to the descendants, to the lineages that we stand in individually and collectively. Blessings and thanks to all of our allies and friends. Blessings and thanks to the vast guiding forces that know and shape our destiny. And blessings and thanks to the web from which all things come and to which all things return. And blessings and thanks to the gods and powers that have taught me and guide me. May your words shine through me in a way that brings all of us respect and honor and blessings. Blessings and thanks. May you have a nice time in whatever you're doing next. Good night. Hail and farewell.